The scar that ran across Dara Singh's left eye had turned white with age. She received it at 17 during her first real fight. Now at 26, she carried 11 more scars, and each one had taught her something that no classroom ever could. She walked through the gates of the Sindari Blade Academy carrying only a cloth-wrapped blade and a small bag of clothes. Around her, alien students moved in groups, their forearms gesturing elegantly as they talked. The Sindari were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and movements that looked like dancing even when they were simply walking. The academy itself was beautiful. White stone towers reached toward the purple sky of Kesoth Roman 4. Banners displayed the symbols of blade forms that had been practiced here for 2,000 years. Everything about this place spoke of tradition, of perfection, of ancient wisdom passed down through generations. Dara felt like a rock thrown into a pond of silk. A young Sindari approached her at the registration hall. He looked at her simple blade, then at her scarred face, then at the single pair of arms she possessed. His expression was polite but clearly unimpressed. "Human exchange student," he said, reading from a tablet. "You have been assigned to the beginning forms class." "I was a soldier for 8 years," Dara said. "Yes, but you have not studied Sindari blade technique. You must start at the beginning like everyone else." Dara did not argue. She simply nodded and followed his directions to her dormitory. The next morning, she entered the training hall for her first class. 30 young Sindari students stood in perfect rows, their practice blades held in their lower right hands. Instructor Morval walked among them, his forearms folded behind his back. He was old for a Sindari, with deep lines on his face and silver streaks in his dark hair. "Today we practice the first form," Morval announced. "The foundation of all Sindari blade combat. Watch carefully." He drew his blade and began to move. His body twisted in a wide spiral, blade extending outward in a sweeping arc. He spun twice, then dropped low, then rose with the blade cutting upward. The movement was beautiful. It looked like wind given physical form. The students applauded softly. "Now," Morval said, "you will practice." The hall filled with the sound of movement as 30 students attempted to copy what they had seen. Dara stood at the back of the room and watched. Her blade remained at her side. Morval noticed. He walked toward her with slow, measured steps. "Human, why do you not practice?" "I am watching first," Dara said, "learning." "You learn by doing. Perform the first form." Dara raised her blade. She did not spin. She did not twist. She stepped forward once and thrust straight ahead in a simple, direct motion. Then she returned to her starting position. Silence fell across the training hall. "That is not the first form," Morval said carefully. "No, it is how I was trained to fight." "Then you were trained incorrectly. Watch again." Morval performed the first form once more, even more slowly this time. He explained each movement. The initial spin created momentum. The wide arc built power. The drop and rise confused the enemy's eye. Dara watched it all. She saw the 2 full seconds where his back was exposed. She saw the moment when his weight shifted too far forward. She saw the gap between his third and fourth movement where a simple thrust would end the fight before it began. She said nothing. She attempted to copy the form as instructed. Her version was clumsy and awkward because she did not have 4 arms for balance. "Better," Morval said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Practice this 1,000 times before next class." That evening, Dara sat alone in the dining hall. The Sindari students kept their distance, whispering to each other and glancing her way. She did not mind. She had been the outsider before. A young female Sindari approached her table. She was small for her species, barely taller than Dara herself. "May I sit with you?" she asked. "Yes." "I am Nira." She sat down with a tray of food that smelled like flowers. "I saw you in class today. Your technique was very different." "I was a soldier," Dara said. "On Earth, we fight differently." "I have never seen real combat," Nira admitted. "None of us have. The Sindari have been at peace for 800 years." Dara looked at her. Then why do you study blade combat? Tradition, honor, the forms are considered high art. Neera paused. Is it true that humans fight wars constantly? Yes, I was in 3 before I turned 25. Neera's eyes widened. What is it like, real fighting? Dara was quiet for a long moment. She thought about blood and screaming and the sound a blade makes when it hits bone. She thought about friends who died because they hesitated for half a second. She thought about the enemy soldier who gave her the scar across her eye, and how she had killed him 2 heartbeats later. Ugly, she finally said. Fast, nothing like what I saw today. Neera leaned forward. What do you mean? Dara looked around the dining hall at the graceful Sindari students practicing their forms even while eating. She watched their beautiful, elaborate movements. She saw how they telegraphed every action, how they left themselves open, how they prioritized looking impressive over staying alive. These forms, Dara said quietly, almost to herself, they would get you killed in 10 seconds. Neera stared at her with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. She opened her mouth to respond, but Dara had already returned to her meal, her expression distant, lost in memories of battles that these peaceful aliens could never imagine. 3 weeks passed at the academy. Dara learned all 17 forms, though she performed them without grace or beauty. The other students had stopped laughing at her clumsy movements. Now they simply ignored her, which suited Dara fine. But Ren could not ignore her. He was the top student in the academy, a tall Sindari with perfect form and a family history of blade masters going back 15 generations. He had won every tournament since he was 12 years old. He had never lost a single match. And he hated looking at Dara's ugly technique every day in class. Human, he called out during practice one morning, your blade work is an insult to this academy. Dara continued her exercise without responding. I am speaking to you, Ren said louder. The other students stopped to watch. Dara lowered her blade. I heard you. Then respond properly, or do humans lack basic manners as well as skill? I have nothing to say to you. Ren's face darkened. He walked toward her until they stood only an arm's length apart. You think you are better than us? You with your single pair of arms and your primitive techniques. I think nothing about you at all, Dara said calmly. The insult landed harder than any blade could. Ren's 4 hands clenched into fists. I challenge you, he announced. A demonstration duel, right now. Let everyone see the difference between true blade art and human savagery. Instructor Morval stepped forward. He had been watching from across the hall. This is irregular. Challenges must be scheduled. Let her refuse then, Ren said. Let her admit she is not worthy to train alongside us. Morval looked at Dara. Do you accept? Dara thought about saying no. She had nothing to prove to these people. But then she looked at Neera, standing at the edge of the crowd with worry in her eyes. She looked at the young students who had never seen real combat and probably never would. She thought about all the beautiful forms they practiced every day, forms that would fail them the moment they faced someone who actually wanted to hurt them. I accept, she said. The students formed a circle around the 2 fighters. Morval raised his hand. This is a demonstration only. First touch wins, no intentional harm, begin. Ren immediately launched into the 7th form, considered the most aggressive opening in Sindari blade combat. His body spun, his blade whistled through the air. His 4 arms created patterns of steel that were genuinely beautiful to watch. Dara did not move. Ren completed his form and flowed directly into the 11th form, an attacking sequence that required 6 seconds to perform. His blade swept in wide arcs. His footwork was perfect. His movements were exactly as the ancient masters had designed them. Dara took 1 step to the left. Ren continued into the 15th form, the finishing sequence. This was the form that had won him 17 tournaments. His blade moved in a complex pattern that would trap any opponent who tried to block or parry. Dara stepped forward once and touched the tip of her blade to his throat. Ren froze. His arms were extended in the middle of his form. His blade was far out to his right side. The human's simple weapon rested gently against his neck, exactly where a real blade would open his major blood vessels. The match had lasted 4 seconds. Complete silence filled the training hall. Students stared with their mouths open. Morval blinked several times as if he could not understand what he had just seen. The match is, Morval paused. Inconclusive, the human did not use proper technique. I used the technique, that one, Dara said. She lowered her blade. Ren's face had gone pale. He stepped back, his 4 hands trembling. You cheated. That was not a real form. You just walked toward me. Yes, while you were dancing, I walked toward you and touched your throat. If this had been real combat, you would be dead now. That is not how blade fighting works. Dara turned to face the entire room. She looked at the students, at Morval, at the banners displaying the 17 forms that had been practiced here for 2,000 years. Your techniques are beautiful, she said. They are also completely wrong for combat. Morval stepped toward her. Explain yourself, human. You dare to insult 2,000 years of tradition. I am not insulting anything. I am telling you what I saw. Dara pointed at Ren. His opening form took 2 seconds. During those 2 seconds, his blade was not protecting his body. His back was turned to me twice. His weight shifted forward in a way that a simple push would have knocked him down. She walked to the center of the room. Every form I have learned here has the same problems. They are made for fighting against someone who uses the same forms. They are made for tournaments with rules. They are made to look impressive. She paused. They are not made for someone who actually wants to kill you. The room erupted in angry voices. Students shouted that she was wrong, arrogant, disrespectful. Morval called for silence but was ignored. Nira caught Dara's eye from across the room. The young Sindari did not look angry. She looked thoughtful. And when Dara walked out of the training hall, Nira followed. That night, Nira knocked on Dara's dormitory door. Teach me, she said. Teach me how humans really fight. Before Dara could answer, a messenger arrived with a formal summons. Grand Master Paulith, the ancient head of the academy, wanted to see her immediately. Grand Master Paulith's chamber sat at the top of the academy's oldest tower. The walls were covered with ancient blades, each one carried by a legendary master from centuries past. The room smelled of old paper and metal polish. Paulith himself was the oldest Sindari that Dara had ever seen. His blue skin had faded to nearly white, and his 4 arms moved slowly, as if carrying invisible weights. But his eyes were sharp and clear. Sit, he said, gesturing to a cushion on the floor. Dara sat. She expected anger. She expected punishment. She expected to be expelled from the academy for disrespecting their traditions. Instead, Paulith asked a question. You said our techniques are wrong. Explain what you meant. Dara considered her words carefully. The forms I have learned here are designed for a fight where both people follow the same rules, the same timing, the same movements. They are designed for beauty and tradition. And this is wrong. It is wrong for real combat. In a real fight, there are no rules. There is no timing that both sides agree on. There is only one goal: survive. Paulith was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. I have been the Grand Master of this academy for 400 years. I have taught thousands of students. I have perfected every form, written 12 books on blade technique, and judged more tournaments than I can count. He paused. I have never once faced real combat. Dara stared at him. Neither has any Sindari in 800 years, Paulith continued. Our last war ended before my grandfather was born. We have had peace for so long that we forgot what fighting actually means. Then why does the academy exist? Tradition, honor, art. Paulith gestured at the ancient blades on his walls. These weapons belong to warriors who fought in our civil wars 2,000 years ago. They developed the original forms through blood and death. Every technique they created was designed to keep them alive. He stood slowly and walked to the window. The academy spread out below them, beautiful and ancient. But peace changed everything. Without real enemies, we had no way to test our techniques, so we tested them against each other in tournaments. We made rules to keep fighters safe. We judged matches on form and beauty rather than effectiveness. And the original purpose was forgotten, Dara said. Worse, it was replaced. Paulith turned to face her. The forms were refined over generations. Each master added complexity, elegance, artistry. The simple techniques that actually worked in combat were considered too ugly. They were removed. What remained was beautiful but hollow. Why are you telling me this? Because the Academy has a contract with the Galactic Coalition. We train soldiers for their military, warriors who may face real combat. Paulith's voice dropped to a whisper. I have been sending my students to die for centuries, armed with techniques that will fail them when they need them most. The weight of his words filled the room. Dara understood now why she had been summoned. This was not a punishment. This was a confession. What do you want from me? She asked. I want to understand how humans fight, how your people develop techniques that actually work. Dara thought about Earth's bloody history, the endless wars, the millions dead. The constant refinement of killing methods over thousands of years. On my world, we never had 800 years of peace, she said. We always had enemies. Every generation faced combat. Every technique was tested in real blood. The ones that worked survived. The ones that failed died with the people who used them. Evolution through death, Paulith said quietly. Yes, our blade work is ugly because we removed everything that did not keep us alive. No spinning, no dancing, no wasted movement. Every action has one purpose, end the fight as quickly as possible. Show me. Dara stood. She drew her simple blade, the one she had carried through 3 wars. She demonstrated the basic techniques she had learned as a young soldier. Step forward, thrust. Step back, guard, move to the side, strike the closest target. Do not stop until the enemy is down. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It looked like exactly what it was. A method designed by people who had killed and been killed, refined by necessity into pure efficiency. When she finished, Paulith's eyes were wet. 2,000 years of tradition, he said, and a human child has just shown me more truth about blade combat in 5 minutes than I have learned in 4 centuries. I am sorry, Dara said. Do not be sorry, be patient. Paulith straightened his old body with visible effort. I need time to think, to decide what to do. I ask that you keep quiet about our conversation for now. Dara nodded. She turned to leave but stopped at the door. Grand Master, your students may never face real combat. Perhaps the beautiful forms are enough for them. Paulith shook his head. If even one of them is sent to fight, if even one of them dies because I taught them art instead of survival, then I have failed. The forms may be enough for most, but they are not enough for me. Dara returned to her dormitory to find Nira waiting outside her door. What happened? Nira asked. Are you being expelled? No, the opposite, I think. Dara unlocked her door. Come inside. If you still want to learn how humans fight, we should start tonight. 2 weeks of secret training followed. Every night after classes, Nira came to Dara's room. She learned to abandon the elegant forms she had practiced since childhood. She learned to move simply and directly. She learned that real combat had no music, no beauty, no glory. Then Ren discovered them, and everything changed. Admiral, Gareth arrived without warning on a cold morning. Her ship landed in the Academy's courtyard while students were still eating breakfast. By the time Dara reached the main hall, the entire teaching staff had already gathered to greet her. Gareth was a Corvan, a species known for their military tradition. She had gray scales, yellow eyes, and a face that looked like it had never smiled. 3 battle scars crossed her neck, and she walked with the careful awareness of someone who had survived many fights. I am here to evaluate your training program, she announced. The Coalition has received complaints that Academy graduates are not performing well in actual combat situations. Morval stepped forward. Admiral, I assure you that our training is the finest in the galaxy. Our students master the 17 forms to perfection. I do not care about forms, I care about soldiers who can fight. Gareth looked around the hall. Show me your training methods now. The entire academy scrambled to prepare a demonstration. Students rushed to change into formal training clothes. Instructors argued about which forms would be most impressive. The training hall was swept and polished until it gleamed. Dara stood at the back of the crowd with Nira. They watched the chaos with growing concern. This will not go well, Nira whispered. No, Dara agreed. It will not. The demonstration began an hour later. Morval personally led the advanced students through all 17 forms, performed in perfect unison. The movements were beautiful. The timing was flawless. Every blade cut the air in exactly the same pattern at exactly the same moment. Gareth watched with a face of stone. When the forms were finished, she raised one scaled hand. Stop, I have seen enough. Morval smiled hopefully. The precision of our students is remarkable, yes. Generations of refinement have created perfect warriors. I have not seen a single warrior in this room, Gareth said flatly. I have seen dancers, performers, artists perhaps, but not one person who could survive 30 seconds in real combat. The hall went silent. These forms you are so proud of take too long to execute. They leave the body exposed. They telegraph every movement to the enemy. Any trained soldier would kill your students before they completed their first technique. Morval's face darkened. Admiral, with respect, these forms have been refined over 2,000 years by the greatest blade masters in Sindari history. And when was the last time a Sindari blade master faced actual combat? No one answered. Gareth pointed at the students. I want to see sparring, real sparring, not choreographed demonstrations. Show me how they fight. Morval arranged for 2 senior students to face each other. They bowed formally, drew their blades, and began. The match looked impressive at first. Both students moved through their forms with grace and skill. Their blades clashed in patterns that seemed almost musical. But Gareth was right. It was choreographed. Both students knew exactly what the other would do because they had both learned the same forms. They were not fighting. They were performing a dance that both had memorized. The match ended when one student touched the other's shoulder, scoring a point according to tournament rules. This is what you call fighting, Gareth's voice dripped with contempt. They took turns. They waited for each other to finish their forms before responding. In real combat, waiting will get you killed. She scanned the crowd and stopped when she saw Dara. You, the human, come forward. Dara walked to the center of the hall. She felt every eye in the room focus on her. I read your file, Gareth said. 3 wars, multiple confirmed kills, 11 scars from blade combat. She looked at Morval. Have your best student fight her. Ren stepped forward before anyone else could speak. He wanted revenge for his humiliation weeks ago. His 4 hands gripped his blade with obvious anger. Gladly, he said. Morval looked uncomfortable but did not object. The students formed a circle. Gareth stood where she could see every movement. Begin, she said. Ren launched forward with the 7th form, the same aggressive opening he had used before. This time he moved faster, adding power behind his strikes. He was not just performing. He was genuinely trying to hurt Dara. Dara slipped to the side. Ren's blade cut empty air. He flowed into the 11th form. His 4 arms created a web of steel around him. The technique was designed to trap an opponent and leave them no escape. Dara did not try to escape. She stepped directly into his space inside the reach of his blade. Before he could adjust, she swept his front leg, grabbed his upper right arm, and threw him to the ground. Her blade touched his chest. The match lasted 8 seconds. That, Gareth said, to the silent room, is fighting. No wasted movement, no performance, direct, efficient, final. She turned to Morval. Your academy has 30 days. Prove to me that your training has value, or I will recommend to the coalition that we shut you down and find a new source for combat training. Grand Master Paulith emerged from the crowd. His old body moved slowly, but his voice was steady. Admiral, what if we were to adopt new methods? What if we learned from those who have actually fought? Gareth looked at Dara. Then I would want to see results. She left without another word. Her ship rose into the sky and vanished. Paulith walked to where Dara still stood in the center of the room. He placed one wrinkled hand on her shoulder. For 400 years I protected our traditions, he said quietly. Now I must destroy them to save my students. Will you help me? Dara looked at the faces around her. Fear, anger, confusion, but also in some eyes hope. Yes, she said, I will. Dara stood before the entire academy the next morning. Paulith had announced that she would serve as a temporary combat instructor. Half the traditional instructors had refused to attend. Morval sat in the back corner with his forearms crossed, his face unreadable. Forget everything you know about looking graceful, Dara began. Combat is ugly, combat is fast, combat is survival, nothing else matters. She held up her simple blade. Today you will learn 3 movements, only 3, parry, step, thrust. We will practice these until you can do them in your sleep. A student raised his hand. Only 3, we have mastered 17 forms. How can 3 movements be better? Because 3 movements take half a second. 17 forms take 30 seconds. In combat, the person who finishes first wins. She spent the entire morning on those 3 movements. Parry to block an incoming strike. Step to move your body out of danger. Thrust to attack directly. Nothing fancy, nothing beautiful, just the bare minimum needed to survive. The students complained constantly. They were used to learning elaborate forms that made them feel skilled. These simple movements felt like an insult to their years of training. Dara ignored the complaints. In the afternoon, she showed them recordings from real battles. Coalition soldiers fighting raiders, humans in combat against various alien species, street fights, military engagements, ambushes. The room fell silent as they watched. Real combat looked nothing like the training hall. There was no music, no formal stances, no elegant forms, just screaming, blood, chaos, and desperate people trying not to die. The fights lasted seconds, not minutes. The winners were not the most graceful. They were the most brutal, the most direct, the most willing to do whatever was necessary. Several students left the room looking sick. One actually threw up in the corner. This is what you are training for, Dara said when the recordings ended. Not tournaments, not ceremonies, not impressing judges. Survival. If you cannot accept that, leave now. Nobody left, but nobody looked happy either. Days passed. Dara pushed them hard. She made them practice the basic movements until their muscles ached. She sparred with them personally, defeating each one in seconds until they started to understand how badly their old techniques failed against simple, direct attacks. Slowly, something began to change. Nira adapted fastest. Her small size, which had been a weakness in traditional forms, became an advantage with efficient technique. She could slip inside an opponent's guard and strike before they could adjust their elaborate movements. Ren surprised everyone. After his second humiliation by Dara, he had retreated into angry silence. But on the 5th day, he approached her after class. I wanted glory, he admitted. I wanted to win tournaments and have people admire me. I never thought about what fighting actually meant. Do you still want glory? I do not know what I want anymore. He looked at his 4 hands. I have trained since I was a child. Everything I learned is wrong. How do I start over at my age? Dara remembered being 17, covered in blood for the first time, realizing that everything she thought she knew about courage and honor was a lie. You start by admitting you know nothing. Then you learn what actually works. The rest comes later. Ren nodded slowly. From that day forward, he trained harder than anyone else. The biggest change came from Morval. For 2 weeks, the old instructor had watched from the back of the room, never speaking, never participating. Dara had assumed he was waiting for her to fail so he could reclaim his position. But on the 15th day, he approached her after class. "I became an instructor because I was afraid," he said. The admission seemed to cost him greatly. "As a young student, I watched recordings of ancient battles. Real battles from the civil wars. They terrified me. I could not sleep for weeks." "So you chose the safety of teaching forms?" "Yes, the forms gave me control, predictability, rules that everyone followed." He looked at the training hall where he had taught for decades. "I convinced myself that mastering the forms was the same as mastering combat. I knew it was a lie, but the lie was comfortable." Dara nodded. "Fear is honest. Pretending you are prepared when you are not is what kills." "Teach me then. I am old and slow, but I can still learn." From that point forward, Morval joined the regular students in training. He struggled more than the young ones because his old habits were deeply set. But he showed up every day and tried his best. 25 days into the 30-day deadline, Dara looked at her students and saw real progress. They moved differently now. No more dancing. No more elaborate forms. They were still clumsy and uncertain, but they were thinking about survival instead of beauty. It was not enough time. 25 days could not undo 2,000 years of wrong thinking, but it was a start. Then Admiral Gareth returned early with news that changed everything. A coalition outpost on the border moon of Kesar 7 was under attack. Raiders had overwhelmed the small garrison and were killing everyone they found. Reinforcements would take 12 hours to arrive. The outpost would fall in 3. "I need combat-ready soldiers now," Gareth said. Her ship waited in the academy courtyard. "Whoever can fight, whoever is willing." Paulith stepped forward. "My students are not ready. They have trained for less than a month." "Then they will learn quickly or die trying. That is what real soldiers do." Gareth looked at the gathered students. "I am asking for volunteers only. This is real combat. Some of you will not come back." Dara picked up her blade. "I will go." Nira immediately stepped forward. "I am coming too." Ren followed, then 3 other students, then 2 more. Morval, his 4 arms trembling slightly, joined the group. "I have taught false confidence for too long," the old instructor said. "Let me learn what truth feels like." 12 volunteers in total. Gareth nodded and led them to her ship. The journey to Kesar 7 took 2 hours. Dara spent the time checking everyone's equipment and repeating the basic principles. Stay together. Move forward. Do not stop until the enemy is down. Protect the person beside you. The outpost was burning when they arrived. Bodies lay in the corridors. The raiders, a savage species called the Harath, had already killed most of the garrison. Screams echoed from deeper inside the facility. "Survivors are in the central bunker," Gareth said through their communication devices. "Fight your way there. Do not stop for anything." Dara led them into the smoke. The first Harath appeared around a corner, already swinging a heavy blade. Dara blocked, stepped, and thrust. The raider fell. Total time, 1 second. "Keep moving," she said. The Sindari students followed. At first, they froze. The chaos, the noise, the smell of blood was nothing like their training hall. One student dropped his weapon and had to scramble to pick it up. Another started to perform the first form and nearly got killed before Dara pulled him aside. "No forms," she shouted. "Simple moves only, block, step, attack, that is all." They pushed deeper into the outpost. More raiders appeared. The fighting became a blur of movement and desperation. Nira was the first student to score a kill. A raider attacked from her left, and she reacted without thinking. Step inside his reach, blade thrust up into his chest, push the body away, keep moving. Her small size let her slip into spaces the larger students could not reach. Ren held a corridor alone when the group got separated. 3 raiders attacked him at once. He abandoned every elegant technique he had ever learned and fought like a cornered animal. Parry, thrust, dodge, thrust again. When the last raider fell, Ren was covered in blood and shaking violently. But he was alive. Morval took a wound protecting a young student who had frozen in terror. A Harath blade cut deep into his upper left arm. The old instructor screamed but did not stop fighting. For the first time in his life, he understood what his techniques had always lacked. The forms were about control. Real combat was about chaos. They reached the central bunker. 20 survivors huddled inside, defended by 2 wounded guards. Raiders were cutting through the door. Dara hit them from behind. Her squad struck like a wave. The movement was ugly. There was no grace, no beauty, just desperate people trying to survive using the simplest and most direct techniques they knew. 12 seconds later, the raiders were dead. Reinforcements arrived 3 hours later to find the outpost secured. Gareth surveyed the scene with something that might have been approval on her scarred face. 11 survivors from your squad, she said. One student died holding a corridor so others could retreat. The forms he was using failed him, but he kept fighting anyway. Dara closed her eyes. She had not known the student's name. His name was Terrell, Nira said quietly. He was in my training group. They returned to the academy as changed people. The students who had stayed behind stared at the returning fighters with new respect. Morval's arm was wrapped in healing bandages, but he walked with his head high. Gareth made her official report to the coalition that afternoon. She recommended full support for the Academy's new training program. The old ways would not be abandoned entirely, but combat training would be rebuilt around practical techniques. Grand Master Paulith made the announcement that evening. The 17 forms would be preserved as art and cultural history, but survival training would now take priority for any student who might face real combat. 3 months later, Dara taught a new class of beginners. Nira stood beside her as an assistant instructor. The training hall looked the same as it had when Dara first arrived, but everything else had changed. A young Sindari student raised his hand. "Instructor, why are human techniques so different from ours?" Dara thought about how to answer. She thought about Earth's bloody history, the endless wars, the generations who had died learning what worked and what did not. "Because on Earth we could not afford to be wrong," she finally said. "We learned from our dead. Every technique that failed was removed. Only the ones that kept people alive remained. Honor them by staying alive yourself." The student nodded slowly, taking in the words. At the back of the training hall, Morval watched from the doorway. His injured arm would never fully heal. He would never fight again. But as he watched Dara teach the simple, ugly, effective techniques that had saved his life, he smiled. Above the main entrance, workers were updating the Academy's ancient motto. Beneath the original words, "Perfection through form," they were adding a new line. "Survival through truth." The Academy would never be the same, and that, Dara thought, was exactly how it should be.